Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1145, Friday, May the 29th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the news of the day. Well, last evening, late in the news cycle, we learned that Attorney General Barr has appointed another U.S. attorney to assist in the John Durham investigation. It appears that he is now brought in from West Texas, John Bash, B-A-S-H, to investigate unmaskings that took place before and after the 2016 elections. Bash will be working in coordination with John Durham, because John Durham has bigger fish to fry. So what is going on here? Well, I think there's quite a few things going on here. Number one, Durham is obviously overwhelmed. We've seen him in the last couple of months, really since the beginning of coronavirus, when we learned that he moved down here on a temporary basis to work full-time on this investigation. And since then, he has added quite a few new staff, as well as some top-tier U.S. attorneys who all have specialized abilities in certain areas of criminal investigations. And of course, that has turned out to work out very well, Jeff Jensen being one of them. Now, John Bash is another one of those guys you look at and you say, man, I wouldn't want this guy investigating me. He looks like a hard ass. And Barr, you know, it's funny when you look at Durham, you look at Jeff Jensen, and you look at Bash. They're all three look like guys that you would not want investigating you. They all three look like hard asses and tough investigators. But I think there's a lot going on here. Obviously, we know that Mike Rogers had extensive conversations voluntarily with Durham early on in his investigation, and certainly revealed a lot of things to Durham. And at that time, when Rogers is probably telling him about the literally thousands and thousands of illegal searches in the 702 database by private contractors, unauthorized searches by individuals who were obviously some sort of private contractors, not actual government employees. And of course, the dates of this going back even before the Trump campaign, and of course there's been many other stories written since then about the fact that we learned that all these unmaskings and all this political espionage was not just going on, you know, in 2016, having to do with the election and post-election. It had been going on for a very long time, even going back to when Holder was the Attorney General. So clearly, the Obama administration had been using the intelligence community assets, resources of the NSA and other agencies to conduct political espionage on his political adversaries and opponents. And I think that as John Durham has moved forward in this investigation, he's realizing that he just simply does not have time to chase down all of that. And early on, he probably didn't see it, how it fit into the larger picture, other than, yeah, that's just a lot of stuff that probably went on that shouldn't have, but I got to stay focused on this. But I think he's now realizing that there's a much bigger picture here going on, and because now he's sure and certain that this entire thing was a political operation. And now you look at it and you go, okay, well, this is all a big political operation, just like all of those unmaskings and espionage that was going on even before the 2016 election. This thing is much, much bigger than just what occurred in 2016 with the election. And so it's going to take a tremendous amount of resources to try to understand exactly who was doing the unmasking and who were they doing it for, and what was the motivation for it, and where did the authorization come from, where was the information being leaked to. And so there's a lot of questions now as the overall political espionage, even going back before anything having to do with Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the election, or anything else, has now become a component that is important to Durham, because he is going to be trying to prosecute a conspiracy that's going to be largely based on a political operation, an operation by the Obama administration against their political adversary, because he's already proven that anything having to, that the whole Russia collusion was a hoax, Flynn being a secret agent of the Russians, or Manafort or Carter Page or Papadopoulos. This Durham's already resolved all of that. He knows that was all total BS. It was a political operation. So now when you look at this and say, okay, this was just a big political operation, and now all of those unmaskings and all those unauthorized searches and all that kind of stuff now looks a little different. It looks like, wow, this is actually just, it's much bigger. But I think that Durham, his primary focus was to look at what went on in the 2016 election prior to, during the election, then post-election. Now he's into looking at the Mueller investigation and what that really was. And it wasn't really an investigation or anything like that. It was just a political operation, an extension of the original political operation. So I think that Durham now sees a much bigger picture. And quite honestly, I think even with adding all these new U.S. attorneys, prosecutors, and staff, he's simply overwhelmed by the raw amount of information, the amount of stuff that's there that he has to look at. And I think he is kind of pressured on a timeline. I'm pretty sure that he and Barr do not want to do this during the campaign. I think they want to make their initial, push before the convention, the Democrat National Convention. And that means probably by July, no later than, say, the latter part of July. I think that they're going to want to at least ways launch the initial charges against the primary perpetrators. Again, this will linger on for a year, maybe 2 years. There'll be several waves of series of indictments as this comes out, but I think they want to get the initial blast out there, and I think he's just overwhelmed. And I think that assigning, because this unmasking and all this is now really starting to look like it's part of a much larger crime spree by the Obama administration, it requires a really good U.S. attorney who can just focus solely on this issue. And it's important because now they're really, see, I think before when Rogers was telling Durham this, okay, well, yeah, they're doing a lot of unmasking, it's important, maybe we can get to that, but right now we got bigger fish to fry. But I think now it becomes important to now find out who were the people being unmasked or surveilled or spied upon, and who was doing it, and on whose authority, and for what purpose. And because this is going to tie into the larger narrative, the larger conspiracy. Because I think Durham has realized what I realized a long time ago, and I'm sure he did as well, that what they're going to find is that these people who were all surveilled were all political enemies, adversaries, rivalries of Obama and Democrats. You're not going to find probably too many Democrats unless they're rogue Democrats or Democrats who maybe didn't go along with the Obama agenda. And people like Dennis Kucinich might turn up in this search thing. So, it will be mostly, overwhelmingly, probably 98% of the people surveilled will probably find out were political adversaries. And then it will fit into this larger narrative. But I think that Durham has to stay pretty focused on a more narrow investigation, because there's so much there to look at, and this thing is very sprawling, and you almost do have to break it up. It's like I said many months ago, this is such a massive conspiracy that you almost have to eat it like a pizza, and you can't just shove it all in your face at one time. You got to take it one piece at a time, and one U.S. attorney with the team of people working with him can only do so much, especially if they're working within a limited time frame or a set time frame. So I think what this signals is that Durham is overwhelmed, and he realizes that this is an important facet of the larger conspiracy, but he simply does not have the time or the resources right now to dig into it. And so I think that's probably when Barr said, okay, we'll just go ahead and get a separate U.S. attorney just to focus simply on this. And then all of what he learns, all of what John Bash learns will then, that information will then go to Durham, so that when he's presenting his case in court, assuming these cases even end up in court, I think there'll be mostly plea deals, but assuming someone actually wants to fight these charges, he'll be able to show a much larger conspiracy. And I think there's a general curiosity on Durham and Barr's part as well, just to know, I mean, who were all these people who were being surveilled? I think they have a pretty good idea. Did it include Trump, his family, and things like that? Because, you're getting into some very, very sticky territory. And then you have to wonder who had authorization to do this, who provided the authorization, what did they do with the information? Because, again, as Durham understands, as Barr understands, as all of us have understood for a very long time, a big part of this criminal conspiracy relied on a media strategy. Without the media being there to run the garbage based on the leaks, it would have been hard to move the narrative along. So these people, whether they realize it or not, the actual keyboard warriors, the private contractors, the private individuals who were hired by whoever, the CIA, the FBI, we don't know for sure right now, but whoever put these people to work, were they being paid U.S. taxpayer money? Was it U.S. taxpayer money paying these people? Was it private organizations associated with the Democratic Party? I mean, exactly who's behind all this? And so I think that's the reason that Barr has decided to get one U.S. attorney who's a pretty known as being a dogged investigator to dig in here, because he's got Jeff Jensen up on the 7th floor to specifically find out who leaked the Flynn-Kislyak phone call. And as you know, I've already said, we're going to find out that there was multiple people involved in that decision, because it was part of a plot, of a series of things that they were doing at that particular moment in time over a period of several months. That these are all things that they were doing that were part of a plot that multiple people were involved in. So while it may have been one person who gave this information to David Ignatius, there were probably a dozen or so top-level Obama officials who understood that this was going to be done, why it was going to be done, and how it fit into the rest of their operation. So I think that's what we're going to learn from that, and that's what Jeff Jensen is focused on. So what John Bash is going to be looking at is the overall thousands and thousands and thousands of unmaskings, and who was doing it, why were they doing it, who were they doing it for, who was paying for it, what were they doing with the information, all these sorts of questions, and it will fit into the larger conspiracy that Durham is prosecuting. So I think that is pretty much the nuts and bolts of what motivated Attorney General Barr to bring in John Bash. Now, here's what we know about John Bash. Number one, take a look at his picture. You don't want him investigating you. So we know that Bash was nominated by President Trump as U.S. Attorney on December the 11th, 2017. So he is a Trump appointee U.S. Attorney in the Western District of Texas. He previously had served as Special Assistant to the President and also the Associate White House Counsel. In other words, Trump knows Mr. Bash quite well. He was Trump's special assistant and also the Associate White House Counsel. He was also the assistant to the Solicitor General from 2012 to 2017, and during that period argued many cases in front of the Supreme Court. He was also an associate at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. He also was a law clerk to Justices Scalia and Kavanaugh. So here you can see that this is obviously a pro-Trump U.S. attorney. And that's why Barr selected him. I like what Barr is doing here in the sense that with Durham and with a lot of these other prosecutors that you see and U.S. attorneys he's bringing in, he's not trying to play the silly game of I'm putting together a bipartisan team. And I think he's doing it because he can. Because what they did in the Mueller witch hunt was put a bunch of Hillary donors along with a bunch of Trump haters, almost all Democrats, I think all but two Democrats, and the two Republicans were Trump haters. So it was a bunch of Trump haters that was put in charge of investigating Trump. So Barr is returning the favor. He's putting a bunch of people in who are friendly toward the president, who the president knows or feels comfortable with. Now, he's never met Durham, but he certainly knows Bush, and I believe he knew of Jeff Jensen. So I like what Barr is doing here. And also, it looks like John Bash graduated from Harvard in 2003, and he graduated from Harvard Law in 2006. So obviously this guy is very good, because he rose to be a special assistant to the president and associate White House counsel, a relatively young guy. He just graduated from Harvard Law in 2006, so just 14 years ago. And that's a pretty short period of time for someone to go from graduating from Harvard Law to being a White House assistant counsel to work at a prestigious law firm like Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, to serve as a law clerk under Scalia and Kavanaugh, and then to find himself as the top U.S. attorney in the West District of Texas. So obviously this is a very competent, hard-driving individual with a hell of a reputation. We can assume he's very smart. That's what you can take off that. So very good move, a necessary move. As I said a long time ago, this is a massive conspiracy. And even if you just try to limit it, I said, I don't think you can just limit this to just looking at Crossfire Hurricane, what happened in the months prior to, and then what happened just after Trump was nominated. Because this thing has tentacles that go in 1,000 different directions. I mean, how far do you want to run this thing out? I mean, if Durham wanted to pull every string that's here, he would be investigating for 100 years. There's no end to this. You could just keep going and going and going and going, and you just keep pulling strings, right? But as I said, at some point Durham has to make a decision and say, okay, this is the scope of what I have to do, and I know I could go here and here and here and here and here and here, but I just don't have the time and the resources to do it. But I think he is finding that there are other places he is going to have to go to paint the overall picture of the grand conspiracy, and that is going to require some more help, and he has been getting it, particularly since he came down here about 2 months ago and began dedicating full-time service to this cause. And he's certainly been getting a lot of good help. You look at the type of people that he and Barr are bringing in. These are the top guys in their field. So these are not middleman hacks. These are top U.S. prosecutors and attorneys who are being brought in here. So it tells you that there's something pretty big that they're looking at. They wouldn't be bringing in these really heavy-hitting guns the way they're bringing these guys in here. These are top-tier guys. So it's not like they're calling their office and saying, hey, send us a couple of your guys over. No. They're going right to the top U.S. attorneys and prosecutors when they're pulling these guys into Durham's investigation. So clearly they're on to some very, very big things. And they want to make sure that they have real heavy hitters when they bring these cases. And I think it has a lot to do with, they know that there's going to be a lot of people challenging the credibility of the investigation and the investigators, and they want to make sure that they can rebut that in a big way by making sure that the people know these are not just your average run-of-the-mill U.S. attorneys. These are top-tier guys with real records behind them, and these are straight shooters. So I like the way that things are moving along here. It's taken a long time to get here, but it's pretty obvious at this point that Barr and Durham would not be bringing in all these heavy hitters just to come out and indict a couple of mid-level people on some relatively minor charges. I honestly believe, and I have believed since Durham came down a couple of months ago, that things are going to be probably even more serious than I even thought initially. That he is, I didn't know if he was going to go for the grand conspiracy case. I thought he might just look at individual violations, various things, lying under oath, perjury, falsifying documents, misleading the FISA court. I thought he might look at these like individual things, but I'm convinced now more than ever that Durham is going for the big enchilada. He is going to go for the grand conspiracy, and it's going to be very difficult to do that. But I guess from what we've heard about Durham, if anybody can do it, he can. So I think he's bit into one hell of a big sandwich here, and I don't think he can swallow it whole. So we'll just keep watching, but I have a lot of confidence in him. So something very, very big is coming down the pike. Just as I said, you can't hide something like this. It's too big. Now, Jeff Carlson did a very interesting interview with the Epic Times where he lays out a timeline, and of course you all know I love timelines, and he's taking a look at a timeline that goes from December, about the middle of December, through that January 12th period, about a 30-day period of time. Very crucial time period. I'm sure that Durham, again, is focused very heavily on this 30-day period. I know I do in my timeline. We've talked about a lot of these dates and events that occurred. Nunez, Jordan, Lou Dobbs has done a great job of covering this. Sidney Powell has talked about this timeline. So let's just go through this timeline and isolate about a dozen, about 15, 16 specific things that occurred from the middle of December to about the middle of January. I'm talking the middle of December 2016, just after the election, until about the middle of January 2017, leading up to just literally days before Trump comes in and officially becomes president, is sworn in, and comes in and begins handling the day-to-day affairs as the President of the United States. So here's some things that I think are very important when you look at them in a timeline. So what we see here that Jeff Carlson points out is that there were a very large number of unmasking requests on December 14th, 15th, and 16th of 2016. And this coincided with James Clapper signing that Obama/NSA data sharing order, which gave broad dissemination of intelligence reports. And this, of course, was signed off on by the unwitting idiot James Clapper on December 15th, and then Lynch put her signature on it on January the 3rd, making it essentially a go. And that's what Evelyn Farkanos was talking about when she went on that interview on TV. This is what she's referring to. And again, you see this large number of unmaskings at the very time that they start disseminating all this information throughout the entire, not just intelligence, but Treasury, agriculture. Every damn department in the government was able to look at all this information that came from unmasked conversations and from God knows where else. Then, of course, that leads up to the January 5th meeting, where Obama raises the issue with about this large number of contacts between Flynn and Kislyak. Also, on that same day, January 5th, is Christopher Steele wipes all of his communications with Confusion GPS. Do you think that was a coinkydink? January 6th is when Comey goes over and briefs Trump on the salacious parts of the dossier only. And keep in mind, as he's doing this, he knows the entire thing is false. It's been proven to be a hoax. He knows this. Yet he's briefing Trump, but only on the salacious parts of the dossier. And when asked why he only briefed him on the salacious parts and not the other things, he said because that's what he was directed to do by intelligence. That would be Brennan and Clapper. Then, 4 days later, we get two major events on January 10th. First, CNN starts off the day by reporting that Comey had briefed Trump on the dossier. That was the news hook, which then allowed BuzzFeed just a few hours later on that same day, January 10th, to publish the dossier. 2 days later, January 12th, all of these following events, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 events all occurred on the same day, January 12th. 2 days after the CNN story and the dossier being published. January 12th, was when that communique on Christopher Steele arrived into the offices of the National Security Advisor, both coming and going. In other words, Susan Rice and Michael Flynn both received that letter from the UK telling them that they didn't think Steele's information was solid, and they were questioning his credibility. On that same day, the intelligence community began raising the possibility that Steele had been duped by Russian disinformation campaign. That is in the IG report. Also that same day, David Ignatius writes the story about Flynn having conversations with Kislyak, but he also mentions that the FBI may have been played by Russian disinformation. This is all cover your ass stuff, by the way, in case you're not figuring it out. Then, on January 12th, the same day all this is going on, Adam Lovinger, the whistleblower over there at the Office of Net Assessment, who blew the whistle on Halper about all that money he was getting and why that looked suspicious. Adam Lovinger is put on the National Security Team by Michael Flynn. And that very same day, January 12th, that Flynn puts Lovinger on the NSC team, Lovinger's boss, James Baker, at the Office of Net Assessment, also Halper's boss, informs Lovinger that he is under investigation and that they are going to file charges against him. The same day, January 12th, Carter Page FISA gets its first renewal. That very same day, January 12th, Biden unmasked Flynn. Same day, January 12th, DOJ Horowitz announces their investigation into the FBI's actions during the 2016 campaign. And at that time, all the unmaskings cease. Horowitz announces his investigation that very same day, January 12th. I forgot about that. Into the FBI's actions during the 2016 campaign, and then all those unmaskings come to an end. Very, very, very telling. Very telling. That's a compelling case, man, that you could make to a jury right there. And there's probably much, much more. This is just extraordinary to look at this timeline of events and how things, you can literally see what is going on here. It's just amazing. Now a little bit of political news for a second. We are learning that this crooked, dirty, murdering cop, Derek Chauvin, who murdered that man, George Floyd, shot and killed a Native American man in 2006 in Minneapolis. At that same time, Amy Klobuchar was the district attorney, and she declined to bring charges against Chauvin. Now, this despite the fact that he had over almost close to 24 complaints against him during the 15 or so years he had been on the force. So I guess you can say now that it looks like, I would have to say that Klobuchar, I would have to think, is out of the VP sweepstakes, wouldn't you think? Because this is not going to go over very well. We have the Daily Caller reporting that the Department of Justice is planning a public release of a trove of documents from the beginning, the very beginning, of the Russia investigation. It's currently going through the review process. About to have a big, big document dump. And I think that's what Trump is referring to when he says there's going to be a bunch of things that are going to come out that are going to be extremely damning for the conspirators. Now, regarding this, these hearings coming up and Rosenstein being the first witness, I think something that we should look for here is that I think that what you're going to see, and I don't think this is going to work, and I don't think it's going to fly, but I think it's all that Rosenstein has got. Now, I tend to think that he was turned very early on by Barr, because I think Barr just said, look, man, I got you. I got you, brother. And you can either go to prison with the rest of these clowns, or you can join the other team and help me put these clowns in prison. I think that that's pretty much what happened. I think Rosenstein was turned very early by Barr. But I think that he's still going to have a very difficult time in these hearings. Certainly, there have been people suggest he'll bring lawyers and he'll refuse to answer a lot of questions. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But I would think one thing you have to look out for here is that, remember, Rosenstein and McCabe did not like or trust each other. McCabe and Rosenstein were not buddies. Not only that, it was Rosenstein who wrote the letter authorizing, or basically, affirming that it would be the correct move to fire Comey, that he had failed in his leadership as FBI director. So here we can see Rosenstein is certainly no friend of Comey and McCabe. And I think that what you're going to see, and I think you're going to see this all throughout these hearings, is the FBI and the DOJ pointing the fingers at each other. And everyone is going to say, hey, we thought they had taken care of this. Yeah, I signed off on all this stuff because I counted on the person below me doing their job. They're all going to blame the guy below them. And the FBI is going to point the finger at DOJ and DOJ back at the FBI. And I think you're going to get a healthy dose of that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Rosenstein throw Comey and McCabe under the bus in those hearings, because we know he didn't like either of them, and they definitely didn't like him. I'll also be very interested to see in the hearings if Rosenstein is asked about this 25th Amendment coup. He'll be under oath. He's lied under oath about this before. Let's see if he tells the truth this time, because remember, now Durham's been on the job for a long time, and he's probably collected enough evidence, enough witness testimony that it's going to be very tricky for Rosenstein and all these people now to lie. It's going to be very, very tricky to lie now, because they don't know what Durham knows. But they sure know what they did. So I'll be interested to see if he's asked about the 25th Amendment coup and wearing a wire. Wearing a wire and the 25th Amendment coup. Those are two things I absolutely better hear someone question him about, and I want to see him respond to those questions truthfully. Well, we have Quid Pro Quo Joe telling CNN that he's not yet promising, or is not promising, to put a woman of color on the ticket as his vice president. Well, let me tell you what, Quid Pro Quo Joe, if you do not put a black female as your VP, you are going to have the most unbelievable blowback that you can imagine coming from every possible wing of the Democratic Party. As far as I can tell, the Democratic Party will not tolerate anything less than Biden selecting a female black, you can say woman of color, but we're talking about a black person here, that if he doesn't choose a black female as a VP, he's going to be in a world of trouble. I mean, he's gonna be taking it from the black vote. He'll get 10% less than Hillary did, maybe even less than that. I don't think he has any choice here. I think he has to select a black female. I just don't think he has any choice here. And if he doesn't choose a black female, I think he's going to just get abused. Interesting, in Matt Whitaker's book, he's been out there talking, doing interviews, and one thing he says is, I was happy to hear him say, because I've been saying this for a very, very long time, and I haven't heard hardly any of the other major media figures or even commentators say it, but I've been saying it for a very long time, which is I'd always believed that the insurance policy to me was the Mueller investigation, and specifically the purpose of the Mueller investigation was to hide and protect the evidence that would prove the criminality of the conspirators. His job was to hide the evidence, because every time anyone tried to request documents or release documents, Rosenstein would say, hey, that interferes with the Mueller investigation, that would be obstruction. And that was what was done. You couldn't get anything out because everything was in the purview of Mueller, and if you tried to get any documents, release any documents, you would be obstructing. And even Whitaker says he got the feeling that they even were trying to maybe set him up in an obstruction trap, that if he tried to force the release of documents or make any comments about that they would even target him as acting Attorney General. Finally, and some of you may want to know who the questioners will be on the Senate Judiciary Committee. You have some pretty good folks here and a couple of duds. But the Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans are as follows: Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley, John Cornyn, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Ben Sasse, Josh Hawley, Tom Tillis, Joni Ernst, Mike Crapo, John Kennedy, and Marsha Blackburn. Those are your questioners for the Senate judiciary hearings. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.